Eric, it's good to sit down with you and share our experiences. We both come from such a different background with being diagnosed as persons with diabetes. I think that it's really important for World Diabetes Day that we share the common signs and symptoms. So I'd like to kick off and just kind of share my experience. I was a late onset diagnosis, person with diabetes. I was age 40, and I vividly remember feeling so incredibly thirsty. You may have had similar experience. And of course, with that extreme thirst and all the drinking you're doing drinking water, you're up all night having to go use the restroom. And so then you're exhausted, and those are like the most common symptoms. But for me, I even recall feeling like metal bands were tightly wrapped around my arms, my wrists, and my ankles. So I don't know if other persons have experienced that, but that was a little about my story. Would you like to share a little bit about yours?
Well, share a little bit about myself. I was diagnosed when I was 5. I'm 42 now, so 37 years of diabetes. My signs were a little different. Being a youngster, I had the thirst, lack of wanting to eat anything, and started peeing the bed again at 5. And my mom knew that there was something wrong. Lived in a small town, so I went to the small town doctor. He says, you got to get him to a bigger town, to a hospital right away. And that's just kind of how we found out. Being 5 years old, the shots were a little tough at the beginning. Nobody wants to take 2 or 3 shots a day. Growing up, having to deal with it, my high school years were probably the worst. I guess you could say I lost control of it. Living in that same small town really didn't have the education, I guess you could say. Needed to learn some more about it to be able to take care of myself, and I just didn't know any of that. So now as older and an adult, getting into a routine was key. I eat the same thing every day. I go to bed at the same time every day. You find something that works when you've had it as long as me, and you don't want to steer away from that because you don't know what's going to happen. So here just recently, looking into the insulin pumps, I think that's going to be huge. I already wear the blood sugar sensors, so it just goes to my phone. In a nutshell, education. If you got questions, go to the doctor. They got so many things now. You don't even have to go to the doctor. I think you can just email them now, or send them a text message now.
If I could say one thing to parents of children with diabetes, it's just don't freak out. They have to manage that disease 24/7, every day of their lives. They're never going to get a day off. Yeah, they might want to eat that extra Halloween candy treat. Those temporary highs, they can get right back into control. It's more important, I think, would you agree, for the long term to manage the blood sugars, in a reasonable range, long term, to prevent those complications. And we're insulin dependent, we're type 1, so we don't get a day off. We can't just control it with diet. And for me, my experience was I actually craved sugar. So the week before my diagnosis, I remember putting lumps of sugar cubes in my coffee and eating pretzel nubs by the handful at work. And just massive consumption of sugar, which was just highly unusual. This month is all about diabetes awareness, and for me, I can't stress that enough, because after my diagnosis at age 40, within the next 5 years, 2 of my 3 children were diagnosed also type 1. I'm very passionate about sharing the early onset symptoms. Just be aware of that. It could be in a youngster or an adult. I do feel like we live in an era where there is a lot of hope, and we live in a time of healthcare where there are really great caring people. In fact, I think that's a lot of the reason why I came to work for PDi, because we're a business, a company that really cares about the patients and their experience.